Welcome to another broadcast of Truth Be Told. I'm your host, Tony Sweet. We have with us today a very special guest co-host. Trisha Carr is back with us. You can go to her website, trishacarrcharm.com. We're very excited to have in studio with us today New York Times bestselling author Lolita Files. We're going to be talking about Who Killed Tupac, which is an upcoming A&E docuseries which she contributed to, and her new book, Once Upon a Time in Compton. This is going to be a controversial interview. We're going to hear a lot of behind-the-scenes information that you may not hear in mainstream media. So a lot of questions are going to be answered today, right here on Truth Be Told. So please welcome Lolita Files. Lolita, welcome. We actually have an in-studio guest because a lot of our people are like overseas and other states, so it's nice to have people in studio. So thank you. Well, welcome to the show, and I also have Trisha Carr here with us today.
Hello.
For everybody out there, she is an intuitive.
Hi.
I think this is going to be a great show and a great combo with the two, because I know Trisha said she had some encounters with Tupac. Tupac on the outside.
Apparently, he knew.
Right. He knew this was going to happen.
Coming in.
This was coming.
So, Lolita, I want to find out, first of all, I mean, you're a best-selling author, but how did you get interested in Tupac and Compton and Biggie, and how did it start?
First of all, I love hip hop.
Me too.
The culture, music is my first love. So it's kind of the way, my father was this excellent storyteller, and my uncles, but I also learned storytelling from songs. And as a little kid,
country music and
everything,
yeah.
everything. And so however the song went in, I kind of saw it as a movie. So sometimes, little me didn't know the meanings of words. So I'd free associate to the next nearest word, and then it would stick that way. So when hip hop came along, kind of when I was coming of age, hip hop was,
right.
Coming into being. And so I grew up, into adulthood with hip hop. And the culture itself has just been very impactful to me. And so it's one of the prisms through which I view life. So I loved Pac. I loved the messages, he stood for culturally, and speaking up for African Americans and talking about issues that are really front and center today with, police and, what's happening with the Black Lives Matter movement. He was talking about this 20-some years ago.
Right.
So in his own way, it's not that it was new back then. It had been happening. But look, it's still going on.
Right. It is fascinating that his legacy is continuing. And what's funny is when rap and a lot of hip hop came out, there are people like, it's going to
passing fad.
Yeah, and
hippity hoppity.
Right. And it really did catch a hold and really start a whole generation of children, even to this day, kids that not even just African American. I mean, it really
when I knew
flew over to
that
the
it was
whites.
Bigger than the African American culture and people of color, I knew was in my corporate days. I used to work for the KinderCare Corporation.
Oh, okay.
So I used to travel all over the place, and our corporate office was in Montgomery, Alabama. And Montgomery didn't really have a big airport. So when you flew somewhere, you either had to connect through Atlanta or through Dallas.
Right.
So I connected through Atlanta a million times. And I was coming back from a trip somewhere, and I was at the Atlanta airport. And it was like in the afternoon. And there was this young white family. They're all blonde and blue-eyed. And they had a son who was about 11. And he had headset on. He had I don't know what they had back then, a Discman or something.
Yes, right.
Probably.
Dating myself. And I was sitting across from them. And all of a sudden, he just went, Tootsie Roll. And I was like, holy cow. We arrived.
That's right. We have arrived. Yeah. And I
So-
think that's what kept it alive. I really do.
Oh, yeah, because it's the appeal and the reach of the music and the culture itself just spread everywhere. People found ways to connect with it. It depending on the style of hip hop, it was a message or a way for people to communicate what they wanted to say when they couldn't say it themselves. They could blast their music, have the music say it for them.
Well, I mean, Tupac, I grew up in the Midwest, and, I'm 40, going on 48. So I saw it began. I saw how it progressed. I saw how the government was totally against it, the gangster rap, and, which even surprised many of us, like, man, it must have made an impact when the government started to step in. But when Tupac was really on the rise, I mean, he really it was kind of like Eminem now in a way. I don't think Eminem is to that status, but I think he's pretty much made an impact through his words. I don't think most of us back then either listened to him enough, like myself, to really listen to the words and see how he really stood up for the African American community. I mean, we just said it was rap, it was words. We didn't.
He was a child of the movement. I mean, his parents, I mean,
Were
his
they part
mother,
of the
yeah. I mean,
Civil
they
rights?
were Black Panthers and the
I didn't know that.
New African movement, all of that. And so he grew up in that.
Really?
Yeah. I mean, his mother was pregnant when she had to defend herself in court for a case that she was being charged with, and she won. And so he was basically birthed.
He was in utero.
It.
Yeah.
He was in
He
utero.
was empowered in utero.
Right. And his stepfather, ended up being a fugitive and has been in prison for 30 years now at this point, over 30 years. Should be out. After a certain amount of time, they let you out. The government still has not let him out. But Tupac, that was his life. If he had not gone into music, he was going to go into, being an activist, being a leader in the movement. And so he did end up doing that with his music.
So why do you think he made so many enemies in that community, in the rap hip hop community?
I don't think he made a lot of enemies. I think he had a moment where he perceived an enemy, and as a result of perceiving someone who was close to him as an enemy, he drew a line in the sand and said, "I have enemies," and made enemies. I don't think because again, he and Biggie were close friends. When Biggie was coming up and Pac was already on the scene, Pac would bring Biggie out on his shows.
Right.
And when Pac was shot in New York at Quad Recording Studios, he thought Biggie and Puffy were behind it.
Really?
Yeah. And so he immediately was, and not long after that, because Tupac went to prison right after the shooting, not very long after. He was sentenced the next day. And then in January, a few months later, he went to Rikers, and then they moved him to Dannemore, upstate in New York. And around that same time, Biggie came out with "Who Shot You?" And Pac was like, "Oh, really?" And so he's in prison, seething. Like,
I'm sure he was.
Yeah, like,
Yeah.
oh, you did this and you're bragging about it on wax. And so he drew the line in the sand, and Biggie insisted, like, no,
It was just a clever song.
Yeah,
I
I've
was
done
gonna
this
say,
song
what
a
was
long
his-
time ago. We just haven't come out with it. So I'm not your enemy. I tried to visit him in the hospital.
He didn't believe it
Oh,
though.
that's so sad.
And so that's where the whole, you see the genesis of the so-called East Coast, West Coast,
Started.
he was really just being paranoid.
He had decided, they're my enemies. You were once my friend,
Was
the
there an
heck with-
argument or anything?
I was going to say
Well,
there
that
had
was
to be
that was
something.
sufficient. At Quad Studios,
I mean, that
when
made
he was there,
made
when
Tupac
he-
think. Was there something that
when he was
Yeah,
shot,
uh-huh.
he got on an elevator and brought up to another floor, and Biggie and Puffy and several others were there, and they were recording, and so Pac saw them, and he thought they were behind the shooting, that they had arranged for him to be there, and they knew it was going to happen, didn't say anything, and that he was behind it.
But nobody incited that, or like he just.
So he decided, you are not my enemy.
Wow.
And so
Wow.
next thing you know, you got Hit 'Em Up after Who Shot You came out, and he finally gets out of prison, and Suge Knight and Death Row, they bail him out. After his album All Eyes on Me comes out, then Hit 'Em Up came out, and Hit 'Em Up did not mince any words. You kind of can't come back from what he says in Hit 'Em Up.
Yeah.
And I mean, he goes through a laundry list of people that he disses and hit 'em up. So there you have your,
then it was on? Because
Yeah.
now he really has created a
Yeah,
big insult.
He says some really hardcore things and hit him up, but Puffy and Biggie always contended, like, we weren't behind this dude, but
Yeah.
he decided, yeah, you were.
So did Puffy and Biggie, did they finally get on the bandwagon and start having either a hatred or a anger towards Tupac now because now he's spreading lies about them?
I think from what you saw them say, they didn't want to push this whole this whole division.
Mm-hmm.
But by that point, Pac was a part of Death Row.
Right.
So there's Suge Knight, Death Row, and Death Row is populated with a lot of gang members. And Suge Knight was kind of a Mob Piru, one of the gangs, from Compton. He was closely connected to Mob Piru, possibly a member, definitely a affiliate. Mm-hmm. And Tupac's mentality, the way he was if he was down with you, he was down with you. So he was down for Death Row. He was down for Suge. He was down for the members of Mob Piru that were part of Death Row that he was very closely connected to. Right. So he was basically almost kind of sort of a gang member. And he stood with Death Row. So he spoke out whenever he got the chance against the East.
Right.
And he was from the East. And just pretty much kind of disavowed it. Like, I'm from the West now. I ride with Death Row.
Well, I think if we go back a little bit, and you said the parents, at least the mother, was part of the Black Panthers, right? Mm-hmm. Was he ever a part of the Black Panthers?
That's what he was. He had become a part of the young division of, I think it was the New African Movement or the Panthers. But he had become a part of the youth development. He was a leader there.
Oh, really?
And so if his music career hadn't taken off, he was going to step into leadership for the movement.
Now,
and this is like in the late 80s, the latter part of the 80s.
Were they as significant as they were in the 60s and 70s at that point? Or did they kind of get diluted?
Not as much, because in the early part of the 70s, the FBI was
they were
really instrumental in kind of trying to wipe out the Panthers.
Right.
And it left a void that gangs ended up filling. Gangs were like, well, we can create power in the streets, but then they kind of use their power to distribute drugs, intimidate neighborhoods, that kind of thing. Didn't start out with those intentions. Kind of started, to try to fill the void of the Panthers, but it ended up going left. So the Panther movement, the FBI did a really good job in trying to dismantle it. But the movement never went away. It still kind of always operates. It still does continue to operate. There's still very strong voices that speak up for the community. And the Panthers and New African Movement, all of them were always presented as being, these hate groups and these violent groups. But no, they provided education and breakfast, food for the community, encouragement, positive images.
Nice.
Yeah, and an understanding of the culture. But again, the greater government saw that as a bad thing, as a threat. And when you see something that can possibly spread like wildfire and be perceived as a threat to the system, you dismantle it. Hence COINTELPRO.
Right, right. And I mean, I couldn't imagine, having your mother, like you said, going through this trial and while being being birthed into this. I couldn't imagine, was there an anger, not necessarily anger, but a purpose for him to continue that legacy of his mother.
He was very fiery about that.
Was he really? Because we don't hear that much about. At least I did.
But that's the interesting thing. Unless you know about him, because so much of what's in the greater culture about Tupac is he's this controversial rapper and violence and always getting shot, always getting arrested. No, he was very much a part of the movement, speaking up for the culture, speaking up for women in the culture. The kind of yin and yang of him was he would have a song like Brenda's Got a Baby, where he's speaking for the voiceless, but then turn around and he'd have a song like, I Get Around.
Yeah.
And that's kind of the fun stuff. But at the same time, he never lost sight, and he was lifting women up in his music. Nice. He came from a strong woman. And
Sounds
so
like
his view of women was, women can rule the world.
Now, when he started being a part of the organization of the Black Panthers, when did he start rapping?
He was always doing that. He was doing that in high school when he was in
When he was pretty
Baltimore.
young.
He was, there are recordings of him rapping in Baltimore. There's video of that kind of stuff. He was kind of doing it, I think, in New York before they moved to Baltimore, experimenting with that kind of thing. So that's always, he loved Shakespeare. And one of the connections.
Did he
for
really?
me, he loved Shakespeare. One of the connections for me is that Shakespeare's my favorite writer. And so, when you find out how much he loved Shakespeare and verse and, and that kind of shows the whole draw that he had for theater and acting, but he loved all of that. So he was already very much into verse.
Right.
And you look at hip hop, that's verse.
Absolutely.
That's telling a story, through bars. And so he already had that proclivity.
And I find that fascinating now that he kind of knew how to entertain the entertainer. I mean, he was, how some artists, they sing or they don't really know the entertainment industry. So he really knew how to be an entertainer.
He was a natural artist.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the Shakespeare, wow. So he had a deep side to him.
And that's the thing. It's unfortunate that people, a lot of people only know the surface stuff about him.
Right.
The tragic death, in Las Vegas, the shooting, Flamingo and Koval, all of that. And again, the controversy. He really was this dynamic individual, and the layers to him, which is really extraordinary.
Now, did you find this out while you doing your research, or did you already somewhat know this
A
before?
lot of things I knew. I mean, I knew his music, and so I knew the message that came through his music. I knew the revolutionary side. But over the past 4 years, with me going as deep as I did into his murder, and then with me doing the A&E series, learning so much more, meeting people who had known him through various stages of his life, from birth to, youth, teens, adulthood, all of that, and hearing their descriptions and sides of who he was, I got this incredible view of him, that made me admire him even more, and again, he was very dynamic with that whole yin and yang, and so he went down some roads that he shouldn't have gone down, but that in no way lessened the admiration that I have for what he was trying to do.
Can I ask you how is Puffy about? I mean, it's been so long now. I mean, is he still pretty saddened by everything that happened?
Everything
obviously
I've seen and read regarding Puffy and how he feels about this is, he always seems to speak about like this didn't have to happen, And one of the things, that we've tried to do with the A&E series is explore what's being said versus what evidence we can find. But, you see him, and he often doesn't want to, like, when people bring it up in interviews, like, why are you still hashing over this? It's like,
I'm sure he wants to move on. Yeah.
Move
That's
on
what I'm
from it.
wondering.
And it keeps circling around to him, because of books and documentaries that have been done that point to him as being, involved in Pac's murder. And so that has to be something that's like, who wants to talk about that?
Right. And why do there keep being rumors about Tupac not being gone?
He's in Cuba.
Yeah, and but there's
right.
not any rumors like that about Biggie.
Right. Biggie was huge. He really was huge in terms of hip hop. One of the things I learned about Pac with all of the investigation that I did is that for as big as Biggie was, Pac was just massive internationally.
Well, he was. I feel like. I mean, maybe I'm not right, but I feel like Tupac had a few years on him of popularity before Biggie.
And
right?
I think the difference with
success.
Biggie and Pac is even beyond the years that that Tupac hit the scene first. It was Tupac's messaging in his music. Yes,
definitely.
And so he came from a cause. He came from a movement.
And Biggie was all just lifestyle.
Yeah,
right?
and Biggie talked about the lifestyle.
Yeah.
Pac talked about cops killing black folks.
Right.
He talked about black women being, treated badly when they should be lifted up.
Right.
He talked about the issues that he dealt with when he was wrongfully profiled by police. These are things that are relatable to people. And once it had international reach, it became relatable to people internationally. Sure. So when you become that big of a figure, people tend to
There's legend
create
now. Yeah.
legend about
Right.
you. So it's like, I saw him, in the bodega,
Yeah.
on the corner of Queens and,
right.
whatever. And it's like, so it's in the absence of an answer to what happened to him.
Closure.
People will fill the void
Right.
with whatever else they can come up with. And hence you see all these theories,
The
Yeah.
conspiracy.
my mama
theories.
made him chicken soup last week. That kind of stuff, in the absence.
And it was good, too.
It was good.
And pardon my ignorance. So then, is the retaliation of is Biggie's death the retaliation? Do we know
Remember I
that?
said the moment that I'd be diplomatic?
Yeah.
This is one of those diplomatic
Okay.
ones.
Oh, okay.
So
okay.
okay.
So, yeah, again,
I mean, nobody really. There's no definitive opinion. I guess I should ask.
Possibly.
Possibly. Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. And
We'll
those are
leave it-
things
we
we
can leave it at that, yeah.
actually talk about in the book that I have out now that I did with former Compton Gang Unit detectives Tim Brennan and Robert Ladd. We explore all that stuff in our book, Once Upon a Time in Compton. We
Okay.
actually show the connections.
Interesting. Okay. Good to know.
So-
Well, we'll do it. I'll read that then.
Well, I was going to ask you about Tim and Robert. How did you connect with those
How did
two?
I meet Tim and Bobby?
Yeah.
Right, because that actually kind of piggybacks or wraps back around to how I got into the Tupac thing.
Oh, okay.
On the level that I got into it. I met Tim and Bobby in December of 2012 through my former entertainment attorney. He was like, you're an author. I have these two, detectives who worked on the Tupac case. And they've been trying to get somebody to write a book for them. And, I tried to pair them up with an author a few years ago, but it wasn't a good connection, blah, blah, blah. And so, my ears pricked up a bit at Tupac. I said, really? They were involved in the murder case? For real? Okay. And then I met them and found out that not only had they been involved in the Tupac murder case, over their years in the Compton PD, they knew the members of NWA before they blew up when they were selling tapes out of the trunk of their car at the Compton flea market. One of them, Tim Brennan, rapper DJ Quick, when he was still, an underground artist, had done a song about Tim that had become like this underground hit, this song called Blondie, And as a result, because he didn't know Tim's name, and Tim and Bobby were like air in Compton. Everywhere you turned, they were there. The gangs couldn't escape them. And the two of them, along with their boss, the two of them ran the gang unit. And Compton's 10.2 square miles. There were 55 gangs in Compton.
Oh,
55.
55. So that's a lot of gangs in a
That's
small
like,
amount
how
of
do you
space.
get like two blocks each? I mean, what? That's a
And you
lot.
got these two guys,
Yeah.
managing these 55 gangs, and it's
Wow.
it's the mid 80s. It's around 88 or so when they were promoted to the gang unit. And crack cocaine is just like,
Like
it's
exploding, yeah.
napalming Compton.
yeah.
And the country, but really Compton. Murders galore. There's a high ratio of murders and two men dealing with it. So here I am. I'm a little bit Afrocentric, right? So I'm hearing this, and these are two white guys in Compton. So I'm like, and I hate white savior stories, right? I've never watched The Help.
I haven't either. Yeah.
It's like, why can't we tell our own? Why does somebody have to tell our stories? Why does it have to be filtered through white people? So I'm like, this is the whitest white story to ever white. Two white detectives, 55 gangs,
Yeah, yeah.
blacks and Latinos.
I love it.
They're keeping them at bay and saving the day. And I'm like, all right, keep talking. So they're telling me all this stuff.
Okay,
I would
Blondie.
love to been
Okay,
the fly on
Blondie.
the wall to see
Oh,
that.
yeah,
like,
I wish I could see what my face looked like. I'm really good at a poker face, but behind my face, I'm like, wow. So I'm hearing this part. And they had been promoted to run the gang. Like the Compton Police Department was predominantly black. But these, again, it was getting whiter by the second. Two white guys were really, really, really good at dealing with gangs. The gangs trusted them. There was this, they knew that Tim and Bobby weren't just out to just, jam them up for anything. Like
Right.
there were plenty of times when they catch them with stuff and they go, just give it to me and go away, And so the gang members began to trust them. So DJ Quick does this song. And Tim and Bobby, again, were everywhere. And the gangs knew them, but they didn't necessarily know
Know their
Tim's
name,
name.
yeah.
They just knew he had this blonde hair. So DJ Quick does this song. He doesn't know Tim's name. The song is called Blondie. So Blondie, Blondie, watch your back, F around and get a bullet in your back or whatever. Blondie, Blondie, cut no slack, F around and get a bullet in your back. So the song's being played around Compton, and Tim and Bobby are rolling up next to cars, and all of a sudden the cars are turning the music down. They're like, what's going on?
They don't want to hear. They want
What's
to.
that song? And they Quick did a song about you. They went looking for Quick, couldn't find Quick. But what that song did was it now gave these gangbangers a name. So, snitching is like a no-no in the streets. Snitches get ditches.
Right.
But sometimes, in lieu of like somebody going down for something, then you're like, I got some information that'll help you with that bigger murder case. They would come to the station and ask for Blondie, because that's all they knew from the song. Is Blondie here? And pretty soon, Tim and Bobby were solving all these cases. And so next thing you know, they got promoted to running the gang unit. So I learned about that.
Okay.
I know about the Tupac thing. Then I learned about them being, NWA and DJ Quick. And then they were, very much involved with the LA riots. And then Tim he was on the task force for the Biggie murder case. And then I learned that the Compton Police Department didn't exist anymore, that it had been shut down in 2000. I'm like, why? Why? And it's like, well, we kind of had some conflict with City Hall. And so you were instrumental. You were, front and center with the collapse of a police. Where does that happen? And I said, so what happened to the police? It's gone. And so it was dismantled, and the LA Sheriff's Department was brought in. And the LA Sheriff's Department has been policing Compton ever since for 17 years. And so there were all these WTF moments where it's like, okay, the DJ Quick thing, the NWA thing, LA riots, Blondie song, you two white guys joining 55 black and Latino gangs, what the hell? You were the ones that were, basically believe that you solved the Tupac murder case. You're on the Biggie case. Something happens instrumentally there. And then you're tied up with the collapse of a whole police department. So I said, I'm in. Well, I said, no, I'll do this. And so the thing that made me go beyond saying I'll do this, that made me go, I'm all the way in, is I was writing up an outline for, because I saw this as a TV show, not just a book. I'm like, the visuals are great on this. There's so much history. And I said to them, I said, because Bobby had moved on, and Bobby had become a part of the Garden Grove Police Department. Tim had become an LA sheriff. And so he was still, policing the area. And so I said, I want to do a ride along. Take me a ride along and show me your Compton. So one Saturday they take me, and we're driving through the neighborhood, and we happened to, they had given me so much source material, affidavits, police reports, all kinds of historical stuff that they'd written up themselves. And all of a sudden, the stuff that I'd read, their source material, was coming to life. So they're like, this is where the Nutty Block Crips are, and these are the Acacia Crips. So now you can see how close they were to each other or whatever. And we're coming down the street, and Tim's driving. He stops, and he says to Bobby, isn't that G-Ray? And I'm looking, I have my little flip video kind of recording things. And he said, oh, he must have got out. And Tim says, I owe his mother a visit. And I'm like, where did they do that at? Where the cops say I owe somebody's mom a visit? And I'm like, the mom must have done something. And right?
Yeah.
And then Tim says, but I don't want to just pop in on her. I usually call before I come by. And I'm like, well, where's that happen?
I was like, what is going on here?
Let's go see. So we drive down the street. There's G-Ray. And G-Ray was this like major gangbanger that they had many run-ins with over the years. And he had just gotten out after a 15-year bid, right?
Wow.
Right. And great looking guy, had this beautiful complexion, this fabulous Las Vegas smile, and turned out that he had like, I think Tim or Bobby, one of them said, oh, he's got about 7 murders in his past. I'm like, wow, if this dude was in the club, I might holler.
Yeah, 7 murders.
Who knew?
Only
right?
7.
You put him in a dope outfit. Who knows?
Right.
All the ghosts following him. Right?
That's the story your mama tells you.
Right. We see your daddy. So his mom comes to the door, and my mom is passed. My dad's passed. A lot of my family members are passed. But his mother reminded me of my mother, and she had like a Do you guys know what a bonnet is?
Mm-hmm.
Of course.
Oh, yeah.
Right. That's
from
something
Kansas,
real
yeah.
specific in the African American community because, like, we sleep in bonnets and
Oh,
that kind
sure,
of.
yeah.
His mom had a bonnet on, and here I am with my little flip it in. She's like, "Bliney, who is this?" And I said, "No, ma'am, I'm just doing this for research. It's just for me." And so they invite us in. We sit down, and Tim and Bobby and G-Ray are telling stories about back in the day when, remember that time we caught you and you had a gun on you? And I said, is that a 9mm? He's like, nah, man, it's a 10mm. And so they're laughing about this. And it reminded me of with the Roadrunner and Wile E. Coyote. How
Oh, right,
all
yeah, when
day
they
long.
Clock out and
And then
talk
they
about
clock out,
it.
say, see you tomorrow, man. Right. And they're telling these funny stories. And just behind G-Ray, his mother was sitting. And she's starting to hear things that she's never heard before, never been privy to. And I'm asking him questions, and I'm like, so what did you used to, you had AK-47s and stuff. Where'd you used to have them? And he said, well, I used to live in the house, in the back part of the house, and I would just put them behind the curtain. So his mother's face is like, and I said, ma'am, you never look behind the curtains inside? She said, no. And she said, Blondie and Lad were always coming over here saying he did this and he did that. And she said, my son cannot be doing all these things. And I said, meanwhile, your son was doing all these things. Yeah, I said, did you ever bake them a pie or a cake and say, sorry, my son's been doing all these things? And I asked G-Ray, because his mom, he grew up with his mom and his dad,
Right.
Middle class family. And I said, how did you get pulled into the streets? And he said, because the streets, guys had money. They had cars. They had
Right.
the girls. And that's how the streets got him. But the kicker was what got him into gangbanging was his brother, I guess was in a gang, was murdered in 90. Tim, so that turned G-Ray's like, that's what turned me. But the kicker was Tim, the reason he was like, I owe his mother a visit, Tim had never given up trying to solve this case. So he periodically would go by and see G-Ray's mom and let her know, I'm still working on the case. I'm not giving up till I find the killer. It's 20 some odd years later.
Oh,
He's still,
so sweet.
So, my mind is blown because I've never seen this kind of exchange between cops and the community.
Right.
And it was, what was this? It was March of 2013. So it's like a year after Trayvon Martin had happened.
Oh.
Okay.
And we're seeing all these things where, people are filming cops who don't know the people in the community and they're shooting first and then never asking any questions. They're not being convicted, for this, any of that. But here is this dynamic that everything in the media is telling me it doesn't exist, but Tim and Bobby had this kind of relationship with the community.
That's beautiful.
So when we leave there, we're riding around and people are like, hey, what's up, Blondie? What's up, Lad? And I'm like, I'm in.
yeah.
I'm all the way in now.
Right. Wow, those are beautiful stories.
Those are
Yeah.
beautiful stories, and I
Thank
could
you.
see why you wanted to be a part of it.
Yeah.
We're going to take just a minute break. We have to do our sponsor. And when we come back, we're going to talk with more about Tupac and Biggie and Compton and all that stuff. We're talking to Lolita Files, and I love that name. And so when we come back, we have more interesting interviews that I'm sure she's done, some stuff maybe she's found out while she was doing research. And I want to find out also about what Pac thought about the industry itself, because I know that must have been pretty eye-opening. Right, we're back. This is Truth Be Told. I'm Tony Sweet. I'm here with Trisha Carr.
Hello.
Trisha. And we have Lolita Files in studio. Finally, we have somebody in studio. We're talking about Tupac, Biggie, Compton. But I want to go and find out, what did Pac think about the industry itself? Because I've heard so many people, once they get into the industry, be it from comedians to actors to singers, I mean, it's a big pressure, not only from the fans, but the industry people itself. How was his feelings when it came towards the industry?
Well, I think he enjoyed the industry, and we're talking in the music industry because he was also in the film industry.
Right,
Yes.
right, because he
And
was a great actor.
He was.
Incredible actor.
Yes.
Natural actor.
Right.
And, the way he kind of came in, he came in through Digital Underground, and he was, like a roadie and performed with them, and next thing you know, his career takes off. And I think those experiences were good for him until he went to prison. And when he went to prison, he felt abandoned because he had been on Interscope Records, and no one would bail him out.
Oh,
you know,
really?
yeah, and so he just kind of felt like he was left there to rot, and no one bailed him out.
Why didn't they?
How long did he serve?
He went in January of 95, late January, early February of 95, and he got bailed out in October of 95.
It was because of a gun at a party. Is that right? As I
No,
remember?
it was,
No?
he had incidents with guns. You know,
Okay.
he had kind of had a few cases for various things. Some, you know, were not his fault, where he had been wrongfully beaten up by like the Oakland Police Department.
Uh-huh.
There was a
remember
situation
that
in
one.
Atlanta where he shot a couple cops in the butt. And they were, you know,
Yeah.
Two? He shot two.
it was two
cops and two butts?
Yeah, I think he shot one in the butt, but it was two cops who he saw jumping this black kid.
Oh.
And they weren't dressed as cops.
Oh, so
You know,
plain
who are
clothes.
you, whatever, and he shot him. And he didn't get charged because they were.
He was defending. Yeah,
and
and he didn't know. It wasn't a hate crime or whatever,
no.
retaliation.
And the cops were in the
call it.
wrong.
Uh-huh.
You know, but a lot of people believe that's what set in motion law enforcement being completely against Tupac. Like,
Yeah.
he'd get no favors from them.
Once
Right.
he shot a
Yeah, he shot a
cop.
couple cops and got
they're-
off.
Because they're very gang. They can be very gang. Like culture can be very gang like too. The blue
that you call
line.
it
They call it,
gangs.
yeah,
Yeah.
the blue line. They say you don't. And
You
it's
don't
like
cross the blue line.
yeah, and they would. That's obviously really illogical. He didn't know that he didn't even know they were cops or in plain clothes, but they would still hold a grudge that way. I can imagine.
And he had
that.
already had won a case against the Oakland Police Department where they had, you know, jumped him and beat him wrongfully. And he sued and won. So there are
Yeah,
these
so
two
that's another-
instances
yeah.
of him beating the cops.
Yeah.
And so he was in from early 1995, and then he was bailed out in October. So he was in there for, you know, long enough to seethe about it and be abandoned and feel abandoned.
So he came out with a vengeance in a way, or did he come out?
Yes, he had interestingly enough, I don't know if you've seen the 4-part docuseries, The Defiant Ones,
I have
that
not.
was on HBO, that was about Jimmy Iovine and Dr. Dre. It's just
Oh, it sounds good.
extraordinary.
I think I did see
Incredible.
some of it.
Yeah, I've watched
Yeah.
it so many times I could
Recite
speak
it.
it along with them, right?
Yeah.
And for the first time, I heard it addressed why he was left in there. They were trying, you know, Interscope was, you know, Interscope on death row, so they got death row to bail him out. But he felt abandoned. Like, you know, my record label won't come get me. And he had so many cases pending. He didn't have the money, you know, all of this. He just really just felt alone.
Why didn't he have the money at that time?
Because he had so many other cases pending.
Oh,
He
so
was
all his-
spending money on lawsuits and everything, and, you know,
Okay.
all kinds of stuff that, you know, he had attorneys defending for him. So he really didn't have a lot of money. And so along comes Suge Knight, you know, saying, I'll bail you out. Just sign this handwritten 3-page contract.
Was this
Wow.
like sell your soul to the devil in a way?
It's interesting. Suge had a nickname. They called him Simon, like the devil, or Simon
Yeah.
Says, or whatever.
Yeah.
But it kind of felt like that, you know. And he signs this 3-page contract. And he was willing to take a hell of a lot of less money, like a really piddly amount of money. But Suge actually said, no, man, you're Tupac. We're going to make a lot of money together, and actually paid him more. Things were still shady, though. And, yeah, he came out with a vengeance. When he came out, over the next 2 weeks, he recorded All Eyes on Me, like this
Wow.
double
In 2 weeks.
album.
Wow.
Right, that was this monster hip-hop album that, you know, went diamond ultimately. 10 million, you know, sold ultimately. So yeah, he came out like he had a lot of rage behind him. He felt like he'd been abandoned in prison.
Who did he set
He
his
was
sight
angry
on
at
first?
you know, Biggie
Right.
and Puffy in the East Coast. So he just recorded and recorded and recorded and recorded and recorded and spat it all out in 2 weeks.
So he didn't own. Like, did he write his own?
he did.
So did
he would just write on the spot many times, so other people would do the music, but he would
Right.
just
You mean like he would just
flow.
He'd just
Yeah, you hear stories about, there'd be all these
That's
producers in these different rooms waiting for him to come through, and then he would just jump on the mic, and that producer got a chance to do a Tupac song. The ones who weren't ready, missed their opportunity. Like
Right.
he'd go, "You got it ready for me? You got it ready for me?" And we're still working on it. I'm out, going to the next room.
Did he, when he signed that contract, did he sign the rights away to it? Or did he still get the writer's credit?
He got credit for things, and so that's why his estate owns quite a few things. So the
Okay,
Tupac,
okay.
estate still owns quite a few things, but Death Row got quite a few things too.
Oh, sure.
So when he passed away, Tupac recorded during that time he got out. He recorded some 200 plus songs between October of '95 to his death in September of '96. It's some 200 plus songs.
and
That's
they're
a
all
lot. Oh, go
all
ahead.
produced. Is that what you're gonna say? Were they all
Yeah.
produced?
They're all ready to go. And so,
my gosh.
and there was some stuff that was still being worked on, but Death Row finished it up. And so, that's why there are all of these theories as well about, who stood to win if Tupac was dead. Like he might have been
Yeah.
worth more dead than alive.
In a way, that's like Michael Jackson.
Right.
He
He made
was more money after.
millions once he was dead, was struggling
Yeah.
financially while he was
Right.
alive. The moment he died, hundreds of millions of dollars in sales.
So, do you think this was a hit, or do you feel that it was like somebody just I'm not going, oh, that's Pac, we're ready to.
Diplomatic moment. You have to watch the A&E docuseries.
Oh, you're gonna tease
It's
me,
coming
aren't you?
soon. It comes in November.
Yeah, I was gonna say it's coming up
The
soon.
week of Thanksgiving, November 21st.
Great,
That Tuesday.
good.
Well,
Yeah.
we have I can't believe already about 5, 6, 7 minutes left. Okay. Doing your research, going on, what was the biggest shock or surprise, what you found out about Pac that you did not know?
There were so many moments like that. I can't even.
Good and bad.
Yeah. But just the things that you learned, the things that hadn't been talked about before, people that I hadn't heard of who were very instrumental in his life, and just some of the things that you heard. Yeah, there was a lot of it. A lot of it.
That made you feel warm and fuzzy, and then also like.
Well, that whole world, especially once he went through so many these various stages of his life. Once he got to that Death Row stage, when he was with Death
The
Row,
angry
there
and,
was so much stuff that happened, and
Yeah. Was
there's a
it
lot.
inevitable once he signed that contract that's probably destiny was waiting?
There was an inevitability, I think, once he signed that contract. Once he went to Death Row, I think there was there was a path that was just kind of, it was just going to end a certain way. And he was ready to leave Death Row at that point,
Coincidence? I'm not for sure.
there was talk about Death Row East, and but he was trying to do his own thing. He really wanted to do more stuff in film, and then all of a sudden,
Do we have to read the book to have the question answered?
you read the book to have the questions answered, and you watch the series.
The who? Okay.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay.
Okay, so we only I can't believe this hour went so fast because
I
I love this
know.
stuff. Well,
Amazing stories.
the book is Once Upon a Time in Compton. I love the title.
Yes.
Is that out now?
It is out now.
Amazon and
Yes.
bookstore.
Amazon, iBooks, CNN. Yeah.
Yeah, and if let's just say that he survived, what do you think he'd be doing today?
Oh my gosh, I think he would be right alongside Colin Kaepernick.
Really?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I think he'd have the music. He'd have an anthem for a movement. I think he would very much be a voice for the movement.
Yeah. It sounds like somebody that stood and wasn't afraid to stand up.
Not at all. Not
Yeah.
at all. He was fearless in that regard.
Yeah. And do you think that he? And I know the answer to this, but do you think that he really changed the direction of hip hop? And
Yeah, I really do.
I don't think it'd been the same without him.
Absolutely not. Absolutely. Because he, there was always conscious hip hop that talked about, the issues in the streets, started.
NWA was obviously.
Yeah, and absolutely. That voice that hadn't been even heard before, the issues and, starting with, the message, Grandmaster Flash and the Furious Five, talking about, it's not just hip hop, hippity rappers delight. It's like, this is what's happening in the streets. he took that to another level. This is what's happening to a people.
Right.
And no one's doing anything about it. And the system is designed to harm these people.
Right.
Law enforcement does not protect us. Law enforcement erases us. He's saying that kind of thing.
Yeah, he
And
brought
it
to
took
the
the message to
attention.
another level. Brenda's got a baby. Took the message to another level. These young girls, pregnant and all, whatever. Keep your head up. This is a message. You're not hearing guys saying, why do we take from our woman? Why do we rape our woman? You don't hear people saying that. So he opened up channels that had not been traveled now before.
All right. Well, you guys are going to have to pick up the book, Once Upon a Time in Compton, in November on A&E. It's
November 21st.
November. Oh, that's right around Thanksgiving.
2 days before Thanksgiving.
Nice.
Holiday watching.
nice.
And it's going to go on for 6 weeks.
I'm definitely
Great.
going to be watching.
Yeah.
I
Who
know.
killed Tupac?
I wish we had more time because I wanted to ask about his not only love interest but his close friends. And did you get to interview some of the celebrities that
Absolutely, a lot of them.
that would have been fun just to hear the
Watch
stories.
the show.
I will.
Read
And
our
Tony-
I
book.
will, but I have you right in front of me. That's why.
But I'm diplomatically not saying anything.
Right.
You mentioned at the beginning of the show, so Tony asked me to come and co-host with him
Yes.
today.
Tell us your story.
Yes.
He asked me. Well, it's not that long of a story,
No,
but just
but
because you
still,
mentioned it
it's
at the
interesting.
beginning, well, he asked me on this past Sunday, so less than a week ago. And when he asked me, I realized I had a dream about Tupac about a week before that, and it's not like there was any other reason. I don't listen to the music, and I hadn't heard about your work, so it was sure that it was a precognitive dream, and he knew that y'all were coming together, and from the vantage point of the other side, you can see that I was going to be joining Tony. So I think
supposed to be here.
he gave us our blessing. He gave us a blessing.
That's right. That's right. And I think that means that also Lolita is doing what she was supposed to be doing.
Absolutely,
That happened a
Your
lot during the
blessing.
show. He
Oh
did
boy.
show up in the music a lot.
Really?
Ooh,
Every time
beautiful.
I got in the car, a Tupac song came out. Like he was a brand new artist. And I'm like, this is crazy.
Chills.
Chills.
Yeah.
It happened like when it happens 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 times, you're like, that's weird. And when it happens like 40, 50, 60
Now
times.
you're laughing. You're like,
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah, I get it.
And I get it. I like the song.
Quit
It was,
nagging
it was
me.
the thing I would point out to people, like, watch, a Tupac song is going to come on. It will come on.
Amazing.
That's pretty awesome. But I'm sure
that.
he wants his
Look at
story
that.
to be told.
That's what I felt.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm.
LolitaFiles.com. And thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for having me.
I know it's cheesy, but I'm going to give you applause anyway.
I'll take it.
All right, guys. Thank you guys for tuning in to Truth Be Told. I know you guys have a lot of comments and questions. And so right below here on our YouTube channel, make sure you subscribe, leave a comment. We want to hear from you, good and bad, because I love them all. Because I think when good and bad, it means we're making a difference and we're getting people to talk about this. So I know that Tupac made a huge impact on you guys. We'd love to hear your stories. So maybe you can put those in the comments too. So go to truthbetoldwebtv.com. Check out all of our upcoming guests. We have some great guests coming up in October. And Tricia, I know you have a show right here on...
I do on UBN. It's called Charmed Life with Tricia Carr. I talk about metaphysics, spirituality, and I have on guest expert intuitives of all sorts. You can call in and get a reading or ask a spiritual question.
Perfect. And I know I try to give a reading, but you wouldn't get much out of it. So. All right. Until then, we'll see you next time right here on Truth Be Told.